Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today we have Gary Jones as our guest, and he's a producer and director. The name of his company is Mosquito Entertainment. And then I have my co-host on today, Stephen David Brooks, who this particular segment is called All Things Indie, and that's where we bring you the best of things indie, independent in film, in music, and whatever else is Stephen's whim. So, Stephen, first off, and Gary, welcome Gary first as the guest, and Stephen, good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see yours as well.
Thanks. I'm happy to be on board.
All right. So first off, how I normally like to start this segment is Steven is the person that he calls the shots on who's coming on the show. And he's got a long, long list of people. And so whenever he brings on a guest, I know it's special. So first off, Steven, give me some of the backstory. So Gary's on, man. What did you guys meet? Like, where'd all this start?
Well, we met on that movie. See the poster right behind your left shoulder, Spiders. I have to give a little backstory to this. So Toby Hooper, who I had worked with on The Mangler, called me one day and said, "Would you like to write a giant spider movie for New Image?" Now, New Image is a company that they were like the kings of AFM, kings of low budget horror and action. Their movies would always be on Sci-Fi Channel and cable and so on. And I said, sure, why not? I mean, I was a screenwriter now. So anyway, he introduced me to Boaz Davidson at New Image. I wanted to meet with Boaz, and he said, "My friend, we want to write a movie about spiders. Now, it has to start in a cave because we have a cave set in Bulgaria, and it has to end on the 405 freeway with a spider eating a car." And he showed me the poster for the movie. And it was a mock-up of a spider pulling the roof off a car. So just for anyone out there who wants to be a professional screenwriter, this is the majority of your work will be this kind of thing where you're taking someone else's idea, perhaps an idea that's already been sold, like Spiders was. It had already been sold. And you have to try to craft that into a workable screenplay. So we started working on the script. Eventually it became, they had some space footage from the space shuttle, some HD footage. So it was, let's start in space, then go to the cave because we have a set in Bulgaria, and on the 405 freeway with the spider ripping off the hood of a car. So we went through several drafts of the script, I think 3 drafts. And then one day I go into Boaz's office and I see a guy sitting at the end of the sofa who has really big hair like me. And that was Gary. So take it away, Gary, from your perspective. Wow. That's the backstory.
You like brother. No.
Yeah. Well, I think my hair wasn't as gray, but that was a couple of years ago, if I remember. But yeah, I mean, what was interesting because New Image was making all these creature features for Sci-Fi Channel and like for the world market. And, I grew up loving all the sci-fi movies from the 50s. And so, this was like a natural thing. I'm like, oh, wow, they're doing spiders. And a good buddy of mine, Robert Kurtzman, had recommended, hey, you should talk to Gary. And, he said, Gary, these guys are doing these movies. And Robert's company, KMB Effects, was doing the monsters, the creatures for him. So anyway, I went in and I brought Mosquito, my first movie, and I had done some episodes of Xena Warrior Princess at the time. And so I had a feature film and some TV experience. And I went in and I had a big background in special effects. So I went in, and I think that's one of the things that Boaz Davidson, New Image, they liked was I had an effects background. I love this kind of genre stuff, and I'd kind of been working in that genre. And so he gives me the script, and it's spiders, and I go back and I read it. This is before I met Steve. And I remember reading the script and going, oh, shoot, the budget I think was just under $2 million, and I'm reading this script, and it's like, it's in space, it's on the 405 freeway, which I'm thinking, we ain't going to shut down the 405 freeway. And it was like in Peru and caves. It was literally like I saw like 3 movies here. Like, this is so big, And so I was kind of like, damn, I got to go in and do this meeting and I got to tell them what I think. And I'm like, am I going to lose this gig? And I thought, man, I just can't go in there and go, oh, this is great, I'm ready to go. So I went, if I don't, it's a good experience for people to remember. It's like, when you go into these meetings, you go to do this, to do a movie or whatnot. Go there and bullshit him and lie and everything, you're going to get called out at some point down the line, and you're going to fail. You got to go in and just lay it on the line if you don't get it. So I went in, I'm like, I'm not going to get the gig. So I went and I said, Boaz, I really like the idea. I said, but the script's too big. It's too,
Mm.
you can't do, I don't see how I could do it on that budget. And he was like, what do you mean? I go, well, it's like 3 movies. And of course, when I went in, Steve's coming in. And so Steve's there and I'm like, oh, the writer's there. And I'm like, gosh, if I trash this, first off, this guy's not going to like me, right? And I'm like, I wonder if he gets fired. And I'm like, well, we're both going to get fired. It doesn't matter. So I was a little apprehensive, but then I'm like, no, I just got to let it go. And so I said all that stuff, and I was kind of letting my corner of my eyes watching Steve, and he's kind of just sitting there. And I'm like, either he's stewing. I couldn't tell whether he was happy or like he was like, get this guy out of here. So anyway, much to my surprise, and I got to say, this is something about Boaz Davison that's like you rarely meet executives. But Boaz is a filmmaker. Rarely meet people that go, okay, well, what would you do? And he said, all right, yes, it's very big. We have a lot of ideas. So what would you do? What you guys get together maybe and you pare it down, you make a movie out of it. And I'm like, wow, okay. So it was really, I think by just laying it on the line, Boaz kind of saw where it was. And Boaz knew, look, we're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall here. We need guys to come in, writers, directors, come in and make these movies. And so it was really a good experience when he said that. And I looked over at Steve, and I think, Steve, I think you did say something like, yes, I mean, it can be cut down. It's pretty big. I don't think you said a whole lot, but I think you were like agreeable. And I'm like,
But I was relieved because I was arguing with Boaz. You don't know this about Boaz. This is 3 different movies, first of all.
Oh, come on. Hold on.
And then Gary comes in and says 3 different movies. And I'm thinking, oh, thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Well, I think it was after that me and you went off and we had coffee or lunch or whatever it was.
Yes.
And we started talking, and it all came out like where I was like, Steve was like, thank you. And I'm like, dude, this is like, he goes, yeah, I know. He goes, it's impossible. So I'm like, well, but to Boaz's credit and New Image at the time, and this is rare, they said, all right, you guys go take 4 weeks. We're going to put you up in the studio. You got, in an office at the studio, and you guys go right. And they actually put us in an office on Los Palmas. Actually, it was in Hollywood, but
Occidental Studios.
Occidental. And it turns out what was great about it is I show up at this building, and for some reason I had pictures of this building in my mind, or the stage. And I did some research before I got there. And I remember I met Steve there. We had an office there, little studio. It turned out it was Robert Altrich's studio, the filmmaker. And I remember he had made several movies out of there, and he'd also had prepped movies. I remember one he was doing in Flight of the Phoenix. And on the stage floor, he taped off an airplane. If you remember the movie, it's a great movie. And he had all the actors in there, and they were rehearsing there. And I remember seeing those pictures. And I'm like, Steve, man, we're in Robert Altrich's old studio. So right off the bat, I'm going, this is great karma. So we had an office there. We sat down and, basically took the script, and we kind of went through it.
But actually, there was a moment when you first showed up and you opened your briefcase and a spider started dangling from the edge of the seriously, from the edge of the briefcase.
You guys are freaking out at this point.
They were checking on us.
It was great. So
were you like, have the horror gods blessed this project?
It felt like everything was kind of weirdly coming together, and we're like, man, we're in this great old studio building, in an office where they used to sit and do this. And we got to sit there for like 3-4 weeks. And Steve wrote, I didn't write. We talked things through, and we talked about the beats of the story. What could we do effects wise? Where could it go? And that's how it started. I mean, we basically took those 3 movies into one. And I think we made a really good choice on like taking all the bits and pieces, putting them together, and then Steve knocked it all out, and we had a script.
Yeah. But what was good is, with Tobe Hooper, and when we went through the Mangler, he had a way of sort of going through the script line by line to turn it into a shooting script. The difference between a reading script and a shooting script. And Gary had a similar method, a lot more detailed, is every line he'd go, why are they doing this? Why are they saying this? Why do they go in the elevator? Why are they going to that floor? It's literally questioning everything. So you have to really think about the logic of the script and how the beats move forward. And that for me, was a tremendous learning experience to sit there and go through that. And we ended up with a much better script because of that process.
Yeah, I think it was getting the logic down. I mean, we're doing, it's a giant spider, right? So people got to go, what the hell, right? And so right off the bat, it is going to be what it is. And I thought the only way to, you have to approach it like the audience they got to know where you're at. You got to follow it. And we also did not want to shoot something that was never going to make it into the movie because, I mean, we had a
Hmm.
small budget and it's in LA. It was independent film, but it was still LA and we had a lot going on and, stunts and effects, giant monster, can't be build a giant spider to attack people. And we had three different stages. I mean, it really was an overwhelming project. It was way bigger than, even though we pared the script down, we stretched. I mean, it was a stretch to get that done. But I think at the moment, at that time, Steve and I, the energy was right there. It was like, no, no, we're not failing. We're making this movie. And that's how we met. It was a great start.
That's awesome. What a good story. And I'm telling you, like when you see like I said, blessed by the horror gods, whatever,
Oh yeah.
like the spider coming out, I can't take it. And Gary, I understand Gary and Steven, you're working on something together now. So speaking of trilogies, the Heartland Horror Chronicles. But before we get into that and maybe some of your current work, I do want to spend a little bit more time just on your background overall, Gary. Like how'd you get into this business? What inspired you to pursue this career as a filmmaker?
Well, I grew up in Michigan back, 60s and 70s, and it was,
Michigander, come on. I'm a Michigander. Go ahead, please. I
oh, there
didn't
you
even know
go.
that part. Go ahead. I knew I liked you for a reason.
Cool. And it just, growing up back then, it was great. Every Sunday we get the newspaper and I'd get the comic section and I'd get the movie listings because it had all the great poster art and stuff. You'd have like pages of movie posters of what was coming. And I'd get the TV guide and I'd highlight all the movies.
Hmm.
So my thing was at the dinner table, my dad would say, "What's on?" And I'd list all the movies that week. Bridge on the River Kwai's on Thursday night at 10. We just go through all of them. Godzilla movies at 3:30 in the afternoon. And so King Kong and Mighty Joe Young. So I'd list all the movies and people obviously I'm showing a little bit of age here, but people probably don't even remember or don't even have a clue of is like you'd watch King Kong it'd be once a year. It would come out, it'd be on TV. So you really, when these great movies would come out, you had one chance to see them. And then you'd have to go to the theater to see whatever else. So I grew up loving all of that stuff. And I remember in school, we'd have movie day and they'd bring out the 16 millimeter movie projector in our cafeteria and they'd show movies. And we'd see we saw Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Cat Ballou and these movies. But then one day they had the making of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And I'm like in school going, what? And we had seen the movie and then they showed how it was made. And it just clicked. I'm like, that's how they do it. And
How old were you roughly on this time? Just roughly.
gosh, this would be probably 68, 69, maybe. So I was,
So you were pretty young and you
I was
knew.
pretty young. Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
so I'm thinking, I'm watching these things. This is, I'm probably, 12, whatever. And I'm
Hmm.
watching these things and going, wow, this is like actually a little bit younger than that, I should say. But it brought the movie world to me. Like, this is how the magic is done. Because I had grown up watching these things on TV and then seeing how it was done, I started to seek that out. And I'm like, I got to make movies. And then going into the 70s, of course, the inspiration really was I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Hmm.
And I remember in school, my friends had seen it before me and they told me all this horrible stuff that was in this movie. And then I finally went and saw the movie and it just knocked me out. But I remember going, all the stuff they said's not in the movie. And I realized the power of like what your mind fills in for a movie. You could see that. And then Jaws comes out and it's this 26-year-old kid who directed it. And now I'm going, wait a minute, I don't have to be a 50-year-old guy with a cigar and pipe directing. Young people can. And so that really kind of those movies, Chainsaw, Jaws, and then eventually in the early 80s, Evil Dead came out, which was made by Sam Raimi. And they lived like, probably like three cities over from me. So they're within 25 miles of me. I never knew it, but they had went out and made this independent movie. And I'm like, you can do it. There's a way to make independent movies. And of course, growing up, and watching all the drive-in movies and everything, I kind of gravitated to like, Mr. Majestic, The Getaway, Chainsaw, more of the smaller independent stuff. And so that really inspired me like Spielberg's young, so you can do it.
Hmm.
Sam Raimi and the guys went off and made a movie right out of college. So it's totally possible. So that was really the inspiration for me to kind of pursue the career. And I had always been doing artwork and drawing cartoons and getting into special effects and pyrotechnics and miniatures. So I got in to that field by doing commercials and industrials, doing effects and building sets and stuff. And then I started to get on movie sets. And so I just kind of came up through the ranks that way with always an eye to making my own movies.
But how did you connect with Sam Raimi? That's
So the Evil Dead comes out, and I missed the boat on that one. But then I found out they were doing Sam's next movie was called XYZ Murders, and they were shooting in Detroit. And this was like 81, 1980, 81, right around there. And so I started calling around. I finally got a hold of the production office, and I offered to come out as a PA. And Scott Spiegel was running the PA department. And Scott Spiegel hired me to come out and be a PA. And he said, bring your car. I go, well, yeah, I'll drive there with my car. He said, well, no, bring your car. What kind of car do you have? He was more interested in the car than me. And I'm like, I didn't get it. So I show up, and if anybody's seen the movie, it's Crime Wave is the final title. There's a big chase scene on the freeway in the middle of winter. Well, this is how they filled up cars on the freeway for all the driving stuff is all us PAs would show up. They'd take our car and spray glue blue gels on our headlights, and we'd drive up and down the freeway behind the camera, in front or behind the camera cars, and the stunt guys would drive past us. And Bruce Campbell was actually directing a lot of that second unit. So I met those guys, and I met Sam Raimi, on that XYZ Murders. And I was like, I remember meeting Sam and going, this guy's my age or younger, I mean, I think we're exactly the same age, but I'm like, this guy's a kid, and he's got this, $3-4 million movie he's doing for Embassy Pictures at the time with Ed Pressman as a producer. And it was a really interesting time. And that was kind of my way in to meeting those guys. And then through that, I met Josh Becker, who became a really good friend. And I started working with Josh Becker and Scott Spiegel. And we made Thou Shalt Not Kill Except. And I did all the effects on that and did a little acting bit in it. And that was really my intro into working with Sam Raimi, Renaissance Pictures, and those guys. And then Evil Dead 2 came, or Evil Dead 3 was in production. I worked on Evil Dead 2 doing some effects, but Evil Dead 3, I actually went and worked on the whole movie. And while I was finishing up Evil Dead 3, doing effects and stuff, I told Sam, hey, I'm going to go back to Michigan and make my own movie. And Sam was like, oh, okay. He thought I was going to ask him for money. And I'm like, no, when the movie's done, I'm going to send it to you. He's like, okay, kid, okay, pal. So I ended up going back to Michigan in, 92, 93. And that's when I, put together Mosquito. We raised financing and made it as an independent film, finished it up. And then I sent Sam a poster and a VHS tape. And they were doing Hercules, the Legendary Journals for Universal as a TV series. And my good buddy Josh Becker was directing second unit on that. And he recommended me to those guys for second unit on Xena. And they watched Mosquito and they called me up, and I got on Xena Warrior Princess doing second unit. So it was kind of all through all of that, getting into the business and making my first film and be inspired to do it, go raise the money and do it independently. And it got a wide release through, Hemdale Pictures. And then moving into television and then to feature films and eventually meeting with Steve and ended up doing Spiders together.
And now you're on Mission Matters, Gary. How you feel? No,
We're here. No, it's great. It's it's an interesting full circle
it is
thing.
so interesting. I love connecting the dots like this. And I want you to tee this one up, Stephen. So the new project, so the Heartland Horror Chronicles. Give me the backstory and like how all this started. And Stephen, you tee this up.
First of all, I have to just remind Gary of just a moment because I was inspired by Gary's story about just if you want to make a movie, just go do it.
Yeah.
Go find the money, whatever money you have, make the movie for that. And after Spiders, and then I wrote Spiders 2 and then directed some other second unit for New Image. And they kept saying, we're going to let you direct. We're going to let you direct. And of course, they never did. So I just finally said, okay, I'm going to do it Gary Jones style. And someone offered me $25,000 to make a movie. And I took a $5 million script of mine called Heads and Tails and made it for $25,000. And you can see the poster right there. And I remember inviting Gary to the first screening I had. I was so nervous to screen a cut of the movie. And we were at this little studio in Reseda. And I remember afterward, Gary coming up to me just beaming. And he goes, you did it.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, that's so cool. It's like, so that that was actually a big moment for me. Is like, okay, I've crossed that threshold.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing of like with the independent world, and this kind of goes back to, we worked for New Image in Hollywood. The Hollywood studio became huge, right? Millennium Films, Expendables, I mean, all that stuff. And then coming out of television, which was Renaissance and Universal Pictures, so that was industry work, going from the indies to the industry work. And in the industry, I mean, and it was great because it's somewhere where, growing up in Michigan, I wanted to get to LA and work in Hollywood. It was an inspiration to do that. And once I got there, you find out pretty quickly it's not the Hollywood you thought it was when you were a kid growing up and seeing all the, there's the premiere, the this, the that. The work is, the work is the work. And, you're in pitch meetings and it's a grind. I mean, you got to slog through it,
Well, there are a lot of obstacles. The thing is, there are a lot of obstacles
yes,
to work that no one tells you about before you start.
you find it out. But, again, I love LA. It's worthwhile. Hollywood is what it is. And it's very attractive, but getting it and keeping the momentum going, it's really, really tough. I mean, if your last project doesn't make a lot of money, you're always trying to get the job before your movie comes out, just in case it doesn't work, you've got another job, but it really is that. I mean, it's a machine that builds on success and whatnot. And there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people in it. And you spend a lot of time, I think we got gray hair. You spend a lot of time pitching. And, a lot of time too, is I'm trying to get jobs as a director with other people's scripts and other producers' movies. And, I grew up loving all the B movies and all the, the indie stuff from the 70s. It's the kind of movies I wanted to make. And so for me, it was like, wow, Mosquito was like, you just go do it. You raise the money, you get your buddies together, you make a movie, and you take it and you sell it to Hollywood. And so the full circle thing was like, wow, keep doing that kind of stuff. I mean, it's great if Hollywood calls and says, we got a new Avengers movie, but I don't know, man. That's a lot of hands in the pie there, and like a lot of pressure and a lot of stuff. I really love this indie thing where you just go, I want to make a movie called A Dead Run, about a girl in a van and a dead body. And I'm going, wow, and the idea comes to you, and I'm like, how am I going to get I pitch a studio for a year or two? I'm like, no. I go find independent money and I make my movie. We have the tools now. We can do it independently. It's a really great moment with all the, obviously digital and all access to all the stuff. It's a really perfect storm for doing indie movies. Again, you always have to find the money, but hey, that's the oldest, story in the world. You always have to find financing, but the passion, if you've got that passion, the money comes. You get there.
So how did A Dead Run lead to Heartland Horror Chronicles?
So my previous movie, which is on the wall over here, Escape from Death Block 13, was a big action movie.
For people who watched listened to the Jeff Miller episode, that's Robert Bronzi there. That's what he looks like. The guy who looks like Charles Bronson. We had a whole Robert Bronzi discussion with Jeff Miller.
We sure did.
Well, and I met, Jeff and I had worked together on Axe Giant and several projects, and he was doing a movie called Death Kiss. He said, we got this guy, Robert Bronzi, who looks like Charles Bronson. I'm like, no way. And so of course I got inspired by that. See, everything inspires you, everybody I work with or whatever they're doing, even if I'm thinking, well, I don't know if that's a really good idea, but wait a minute, that is a good idea. So everything is an inspiration. So when I saw, Robert Bronzi, I went to a screening of the movie, and I remember I think it was Texas Frightmare, and I met him, and I'm like, man, I gotta do a movie with him. So we went in the bar and had a couple of drinks, and we made an agreement to make some movies together. And I thought, man, I always loved Charles Bronson, Mr. Majestic, but there was a movie he did called Breakout, where Charles Bronson has to take a helicopter into a prison and rescue Robert Duvall. So all these movies are in my head. I'm like, I live about 20 minutes from the Mansfield Reformatory, which was the Shawshank prison from the Shawshank Redemption. And I have friends that manage it and work there. And I did a tour. I'm like, why am I not using this prison for a movie? I mean, it's here. So I thought, wow, it's a perfect independent low budget movie. I've got a multi-million-dollar set, which is the prison. So I thought, I get Robert Bronzi and I'll make a prison escape movie, and I'll use that prison, which is my, $100 million set piece, right, in the movie. And so we brought Robert Bronzi in and we made that movie, Escape from Death Block 13, and big action thing. And so coming off of that, I'm like, it was huge. And 500 visual effects shots. It had everything in it. I mean, it's a huge movie. But COVID hit while we were in production, getting in post, and the movie was just delayed for another year. Everybody, everything shut down during COVID. So I'm slogging through making this movie. So it was, 3-year ordeal, right? 3.5 years. So finally get the movie done and it comes out. And I thought, all right, now I'm going to make a small movie. I'm going to make I had this idea about a girl who has a van and she's driving a body across the country from one funeral home to another. And I thought, wait a minute. Okay, I can make this. It's a girl, a van, and a casket, a dead body. So I thought, I'll make a small movie. So I started working on the script. I kind of got it all together. And then here in Ohio, they have the film tax credit is really good for productions. But they tend to favor, obviously, the bigger Hollywood movies or TV series or a series of movies. So I was working with another friend of mine, Phil Garrett, and his company was putting together lower budget movies, and they were doing 3 film packages. And I go, okay, this is the thing to do. So I could take a dead run, and you had to spend a certain amount of money to get the tax credit. Well, in the independent world, you want to keep that budget low. It's the good, fast, cheap, right? You got to pick 2. So you want good and cheap. It's not going to be fast, but it's low budget. So I thought, well, I didn't have a big enough budget with one movie to apply for the tax credits. I thought if I do a series, so I kind of came up with this idea of like, well, this movie takes place in Ohio. Then I had an idea years ago for a project I was working on called Appleseed about Johnny Appleseed. Well, Johnny Appleseed was in Ohio. There's a whole lot of connection there. And I thought, wow, okay, I'll do these movies that are all interconnected in Ohio. So we have a dead run, Appleseed, which is our Johnny Appleseed movie that Steve wrote and directed. And then we have The Pumpkin Lady, which is kind of based out of our Pumpkinville, a fictional place in Ohio. So I kind of put it together and went, wait a minute, it's a series. I'll do it like somewhat like American Horror Story, but also more like Night Gallery, Rod Stern's Night Gallery. So there's 3 independent films that could stand alone, but there's a little interconnection between Ohio, actors move from one to the other. And so I put together this series and we got the Ohio Film Tax Credit, which in turn really helped me get financing. And so instead of making, one movie in 6 months, it was going to be another 3-year ordeal, but it was 3 movies, three different episodes, but 3 features. And it worked out really well. It came together in a way where we get to keep making movies, year after year. We're making these movies and always in production. But I also got to bring in my filmmaking friends and colleagues to come in and helm the other movies too. So it was really, I wanted to collaborate and produce, not just direct or write or direct. And so this was a way for me to go, this is great. I can bring in up my other indie filmmakers and we can keep making these things. So I created this miniseries, Heartland Horror Chronicles, and our first season is these 3 movies, A Dead Run, Appleseed, and The Pumpkin Lady. And I got, Steve Brooks, writer, director on Appleseed, and then David Greathouse, who's a really good makeup effects artist I've worked with for years and has made a couple small indie movies. He's writing and directing on Pumpkin Lady. And so we put this together and it's great. We're in post on all 3 of, on the 3 episodes right now. And we're working to getting them finished this year and get them out in distribution by the end of the year.
Man, what I love about this too is that like there's a lot of lessons here, but even like just keeping it on the business side for a moment, the concept of collaboration versus competition and some of the things you said about like, I get to bring other people in and I get to work and make this bigger for all of us. Like, where'd you get that from? Like, has that always been in your heart? Because in this business, it's not always like that. Let's just put it that way. Like, it's not always. Where'd you get that from?
Well, it's never like that.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it is. I see one out. This is my first hearing this, so I'm not claiming to be an industry expert. Where'd you get that from?
Well, growing up, like I said, in the 70s, 60s and 70s, my mom had a Super 8 or a 8mm movie camera and she'd film us at Christmas. Well, then I asked for a movie camera because I wanted to get movies. And so I got a Super 8 movie camera and I started shooting special effects and little shorts and stuff. But I'd get all my buddies together and we'd get in the backyard and we'd put squibs on us and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was more like a clubhouse, right? It was like you got together and built a house, a clubhouse, and you hung out. And so that was a fun collaboration. And of course, growing up, I was really following George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Coppola and Martin Scorsese. And it was like, wow, there was a bit of a club there, these kind of renegade guys making these movies in that Hollywood system and sort of in and out of that system. And it always felt to me like that was really that was the most fun is, okay, now it's your turn to be the goalie, and and you're the goalie next week and I'll do this. It felt like that was the way to really do it, because making movies, it's a lot of work, a lot of pressure. And, in Hollywood and everywhere, it's competition. You can do a movie and your movie can come out, but if you're going for the next job, there's 10 other people. I mean, the competition in Hollywood and pretty much every business is very intense, and it can beat you down. And I thought, well, if we do it a different way, it can be more collaborative, more fun. And really it's about, like, I think Steve might agree. I'd rather be in production and making a movie and making something than trying to get something made for years. It's better to be creative over time than it is to spend 4 or 5 years pursuing one thing. Because, that thing may not be successful in the market. Let's face it, not everything makes money. So I'm like, wow, okay, come up with something, get it done, get it out there, and let's move on to the next and keep going, keep the momentum going that way. And so it was really about bringing that attitude to it. And when I decided to go, you know what, I'm moving from LA back to Michigan, and then eventually we lived here in Ohio, moved to Ohio. I thought, there's people all over the country that are talented, that can come together and make these things. I go back to LA. I've got my connections with distribution and whatnot. I can do this anywhere, and I can just bring everybody to the film club to do it. And it's really worked out well for me. I think you can say anything you want about our productions, but we have a heck of a good time doing them. And that to me is like so important, because you never know how the product will fare in the marketplace. And if you're just waiting for it to make all that money to make you a success, your life will pass you by. You've got to keep creating and moving and never get bogged down in like waiting for something to happen. I did that in LA for a long time. I spent years like trying to pitch things and waiting for something to happen. And, it's not creative. I don't think it's healthy. I think you've got to keep finding new ways, like what you're doing with the Media Matters, and all your stuff is like keeping things going and keeping the energy level up.
Yeah,
And
it's also, it's not just a matter of, it takes a great deal of effort and time to try to get the job. Once you get the job, there's so many, I'm talking about in a Hollywood movie where there's a corporation involved. There's so many hands in the pie that you spend 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes longer, just rewriting the script to everybody's notes. And inevitably, this development process you end up with something worse at the very end. You lose what the initial inspiration was for the script. With Appleseed, Gary sent me like a rough outline, had some scenes, had some characters. We talked about it, and I said, all right, let me work on it. I did a draft. Gary read it, gave me some notes. We had another discussion. I did another draft. And I think then did a quick polish. And in 3 months, it was ready to go. I mean, you don't need to spend 5 years rewriting a script. That's kind of a myth, right? And it's also the fact that Gary and I'm part of Gary's clubhouse. It's a very much an ensemble feeling, particularly his crew. And also he has some fantastic actors. I have to give a shout out to the actors Gary has assembled. This guy, Bo Roberts, who I think is in all 3 movies. He plays a mayor in Appleseed. Yeah. He's great. Matt Fling, who's from LA. Well, he's from Kentucky, but he lives in LA, is the lead of both Gary's movie, Dead Run, and Appleseed. And a bunch of the other supporting actors were all locals, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, we brought in on Dead Run, Matt Flynn comes in, he plays Beale, our nemesis there, and Sophie Swizz, who we found, she did an audition and knocked me out with this audition. It was like she was so into doing this part of Audie in Dead Run that I could not say no. I mean, it was like the energy level was off the scale, and she just nailed it. So Sophie came in and Matt came in, and then pretty much everybody else, all local. local actors, and from mostly from Ohio, but we've got Michigan, Kentucky, and the surrounding states. And there's just an unbelievable, and it's not just here.
Mm.
Every state, it's unbelievable talented people that they're looking for an outlet for that. And I think you can go into any state, you can go anywhere. And if you search long enough, you find them. I mean, here in Ohio, we have the Mansfield Playhouse, which is run by Doug Wirtz, who manages and directs all the plays. And it's all locals, all local talent.
Mm.
And I called him up. I said, "Hey, we got some casting to do. Can you help?" And I mean, there's just a list of people. So it's really worked out well. And I think we have a good formula for always bringing in one or two actors. And I know Steve feels the same way. I love to bring in actors I love from other projects and older actors, to if I can get them into our project. They give all the local actors and the younger actors so much energy. Like, I'm working with this person, I'm working with that. It just uplifts everybody. And it's actually a really good indie formula. We didn't develop it. You can watch any kind of indie movie and they'll bring in a Robert Engler, or they'll bring somebody in, a famous actress or whatever, who's done TV and is kind of semi-retired, and then surround them with all new people. And it's a really good formula, and it just works. And I think it's a chance for us to get to work with actors we've watched for years and love, but we also get to introduce new people and hopefully bring up a new generation of actors. And if one of our newer actors goes off and takes off and becomes the next big Hollywood thing, it just helps everybody. And I think it's great that we can give a platform for people to bring their talent out. And it fits, frankly, it fits in our indie budgets.
And they're not jaded. The
have
thing
to
about
watch
local
them.
actors is they're not jaded.
That's true. Yeah.
They're so excited to be there. They will do anything,
Yeah.
and
That's another
and that's
episode. No.
refreshing. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Not that all professional
Yeah.
actors are jaded. I've worked with
Of
some
course, of
wonderful actors,
course.
but it's a different vibe.
Mm, it's awesome.
But but with
Gary,
the indie, I just have to quickly say, so with the independent films, as everything, you still have to raise financing. And I think from an independent standpoint, if you're moving in, even where you can go from indies to Hollywood movies and back and forth, what's important is that you have a passion for a project, which will bring investment in, because you're going to talk to a lot of different people. And then you look for the state film tax credit funds. And then you also, which we did with Heartland Horror Chronicles, is I brought a distributor in early who became a partner on the project and helped bring financing and is already making inroads for distribution. So it was really about finding money, finding some distribution, right? And a means to make the product. And so it's really kind of a Hollywood model in a way, where Hollywood, the studio would already have the distribution. Like with Spiders, they already made sales. They brought Steve in and threw all the ideas at the wall, and Steve digested them all. And then Boaz, and then they were smart to, like, hey, get Steve and Gary together. They'll know what to do. And then we sort of did it, which is really kind of the indie way we're doing right now. We get together. We know we have some parameters, but then we were able to make it into something that we thought, would make a good movie. And we're just kind of using that model. But like Steve said, I talked to Steve and I'm like, okay, that's it. We don't have to get anybody to sign off. It's me and you. We got it. Moving on.
But it's
which is
also
great.
crucial, right? It's indie filmmakers really need to think about two things, which is sales, which means how much will this movie bring in? So you have to make it for less. And sales related, and we've had this with other guests, is related to genre. Horror sells, action sells, thrillers kind of sell, sci-fi can sell. A family drama, if you're trying to make that as an independent movie, is a really hard sell. So picking a genre that sells and knowing the sales landscape is critical to this whole process.
Right. Find out where you think you can get from it, and you make your movie here, right? So that you've got that wiggle room, so that, again, getting investors' money back and everybody makes, a couple of bucks, and it just opens the doors to do more. Steve and I have to work very lean, financially, but that's, we did it when we started. It was like my first movie. I think I don't know if I made $200 a week, $250 a week.
But it's an easy
I mean,
trade-off working
Yeah.
lean versus having a lot of interference.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. And
Love
so we're making movies, and that's all we kind of wanted to do. So we found a formula that's working for us.
I mean, that's every morning when Gary picked me up at the hotel. We look at each other, go, making movies. That's how we greet each other. you know?
And you also have to wear the same wig, right, Steve?
Well, yeah.
Come
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
And
These
I
are
think
available on the merch store.
get
Oh,
out of here. Oh, is that going to
yeah.
be our merch? And I think that's a good way to end it, gentlemen. We're
Cool.
making movies.
Making movies.
Gary, I want people to be able to follow your work and to follow you. How do people connect with your whole ecosystem and the product that you're putting out?
Actually, I'm rebuilding everything right now, but Mosquito Entertainment is a website where and obviously IMDb and whatnot, they can see it there, but I'm putting together the Heartland Horror Chronicles. I'll be launching that very soon. But if they can go to mosquitoentertainment.com to follow, and then IMDb, where I'm routinely putting stuff up, and then Facebook, Gary Jones Director on Facebook, and Instagram, slowly getting that stuff out because we've been pretty busy, but it's the big push is coming
Awesome.
on
Love
the
it.
promotional side.
Stephen, you delivered as always. Another great guest, the catalog of all things indie. Thank you. Thank you for bringing us into, or me, and in our little neck of the world into Gary's club. We're honorary members, I deemed.
Yes.
Yep.
We're doing the
Welcome aboard.
promo.
You're now an honorary member of the Michigan Mafia, as I call
There you go.
Gary and Sam Raimi and all those guys.
Oh, I'll take it. And for everybody watching, just so you know, what Gary mentioned in terms of the website, all that good stuff, we're going to put some links in the show notes so that you can click on that and connect with Gary and his content. And we're of course doing the same for Steven. So, and if this is your first time watching Mission Matters or the All Things Indie segment, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. We put out content really consistently. You'll know once you hit that subscribe, and we have a lot of great interviews coming up for All Things Indie as well. And we don't want you to miss a thing. So make sure you subscribe, follow, and do all the things. And gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I'm
Thank
sure
you
we'll be
much.
talking soon.
We will. We got some movies to finish up.
Yes, we do.